Hello and welcome to the Farming Today This Week podcast with me, Charlotte Smith. In this episode, a largely liquid Farming Today This Week as we explore the journey from land to glass for beer, cider and perry.
And tumbling into your bucket, that golden liquid.
Yes, it's stunning. We filter it and then we just put it into containers and let it do its own fermentation and its own sugars and its own yeast.
Oh, more on that later. First, though, this week our sister programme, Farming Today, reported on a review of Northern Ireland's environmental governance, which demanded a new independent environmental regulator. The authors describe it as a call to arms and say the new regulator would need to be properly staffed and financially resourced to tackle the many challenges it'll face. A number of environmental concerns prompted this review, including the state of Lough Neagh, which supplies 40% of Northern Ireland's drinking water. Kaz Graham spoke to the chair of the review panel, Dr Viviane Grave from Queen's University in Belfast.
Northern Ireland is the only part of the UK that doesn't currently have an independent environmental agency. But it's not just about the agency, it's about how the broader environmental governance system works.
Yeah, and the current regulator is the Northern Ireland Environment Agency, which is actually part of DAERA, isn't it?
It is. It's an executive agency for DAERA, so it's not exactly in the department, but it's also not exactly not. So it has this kind of weird operational independence, but not actually legal independence.
That was one of the shortfalls that you found in environmental governance. Where were the other shortfalls? What else did you find?
Your listeners may not be surprised, but there's not enough money. Even in NIEA, we're talking about a 25% vacancy rate. So there's a lot of people just missing in those key roles. We're seeing as well a lot of issues around, a bit like in England, Environmental Agency, NIEA or Natural England, they don't have their own website. All of their comms go through their parent department. And so that can then lead to lack of clarity, but also if sometimes a minister does something that is not necessarily good for the environment, then those agencies can't really say anything about it. And so I think just having that lack of clarity around who's in charge, who you can complain to about things was one of the big issues. It's like Northern Ireland is a tiny place and yet no one really knows who's in charge of what when it comes to the environment. So that's something we really want the civil service to improve on.
We've covered the dire state of water in Lough Neagh over the past couple of years. Do you think your recommendations would make a difference to the situation there?
Yes, and in two different ways. So the first one is we're talking about more environmental information, trying to make it much more easily accessible for stakeholders and for the general public just to know what the state of the environment is, so that something else like Lough Neagh is picked up upon much earlier. We're also talking about more powers to enforce, so more civil sanctions, more fixed penalties. The kind of thing that is quite common in England, Wales or Scotland is actually quite rare in Northern Ireland.
Dr Viviane Grave from Queen's University there. Back in May, the Westminster Government announced a fishing and coastal growth fund to modernise the fleet, enhance skills and revitalise communities. Well, the way that fund would be shared between the nations was revealed this week, and the response from Scottish coastal communities has been one of anger, dismay and betrayal, according to the SNP. Scotland is to receive just under 8% of the fund, despite accounting for more than 60% of the UK's fishing capacity. Elspeth MacDonald is Chief Executive of the Scottish Fishermen's Federation, and she spoke to Kaz about her frustration.
Well, we were absolutely shocked to learn that Scotland has been allocated less than 8% of this fund, when Scotland accounts for around about 60% of the UK fishing industry. And in previous funding models, Scotland's allocation of these types of funds was in the region of 47%. So we had no prior notice that this was coming. So to say we were completely shocked is an understatement.
You know, DEFRA says that they're targeting investment where it matters most across the UK. How would you respond to that?
Well, I think when such a big part of the UK fishing industry is in Scotland, I think it would be reasonable to expect that investment in Scotland and maintaining our industry for the future, particularly when the government did such a bad deal in the EU reset, that I think it feels that, you know, Scotland should have a far fairer share.
And the way that it was divvied up, apparently it was the Barnett formula that it was calculated under, and that's a formula that's been used since 1979, late 70s, to calculate Westminster allocation of funds to the UK nations. What do you think of that? Was the Barnett formula the right way to go here?
Well, we would say not, because in the past it was recognised that Scotland was a very large part of the UK fishing industry, and that's why we used to get 47% of those types of funds.
Elspeth MacDonald there from the Scottish Fishermen's Federation. The National Federation of Fishermen's Organisations represents fishers in England and Wales. Its chief executive, Mike Cohen, told Kaz he thinks the new fund will bring social and economic benefits.
I'm very pleased with the emphasis around funding specifically for training, for new technology, for innovation, and for the sorts of projects that will lead to growth. So I'm hopeful that we won't see this money diverted into other projects, certainly something we've seen with past initiatives that have supposed to be aimed at the fishing industry but have ended up with money going elsewhere.
It's called the Fishing and Coastal Growth Fund. What is your understanding of what this fund will actually pay for? Is it going to be looking at coastal communities as well that aren't involved in fishing?
I've seen reference to kind of broader community projects. The statements that the government has made so far have been around training for people wanting to enter the fishing industry, for new fishing gear, new fishing technology. And there's been a lot of talk about projects that will aid growth. And I think that's something that we should be quite optimistic about.
Mike Cohen from the National Federation of Fishermen's Organisations. We approached DEFRA for a response and they told us this fund will revitalise the fishing sector and coastal communities right across the UK, spurring growth as part of our plan for change. Supporting devolved governments with this new funding will help get the money where it's most needed so the sector can thrive for generations to come. Now, our thoughts are turning to drink for the very good reason that a pint of cider begins its life in an orchard and a pint of beer begins its life in a barley field and a hop yard. Hops add bitterness to beer. There are around 45 growers across the country, around half of them in the West Midlands. Simon Parker from Instone Court produces 40 tonnes of hops every year, or at least he hopes to. This year, like many growers, he's been affected by a very dry summer. Marie Lennon went along to the final day of his harvest in Herefordshire at the end of September.
There you go, he's got his trailer loaded up, almost overflowing with hops, and there they go. What's happening today, Simon?
So we are hopefully going to finish the 25th season. We're in the last field now. Harvest has been very quick. Unfortunately, it's been a very light year for us in the West Midlands. It started out with a bang. It went really well, and we almost panicked because the hops were getting too far ahead in the season. And then, of course, we had a very long dry spell and the hops didn't move, and we've struggled to get what is effectively half a crop here this year.
What does that mean for you?
I just don't get as much income. Hops are sold on forward, on contracts, and you sell in advance. Because it's a perennial crop, you've got to protect yourself for the future. We string the hops each year, like a long pole with like a big sewing needle. And then we come back in the spring, April time, what we call tying, twisting the heads onto the string to make sure you've got the right amount of plants on each string. And then obviously we come to September, take them back to the farm to strip and dry.
From the calm of the field, we come here to the place where that crop is processed, and it's a beast of a machine, a series of machines with hooks and vats and conveyor belts and ladders, everything spinning, everything churning, to strip the crop and extract at the end the perfectly formed fruity hop to be dried.
The last one of these machines was made in 74, 75, so this machine predates that.
You feel very strongly about the hops, but business-wise, how is it going?
It's a very tough market out there. The hospitality trade being hit, the effects of the pandemic have made beer consumption drop, and that's a world figure, not just a home figure. Majority of the British hops goes into cask ales, and cask ales unfortunately are falling too much as people drink at home. We're losing breweries, we're losing pubs. This is the finished product that the brewers will then take along and they'll rub and sniff. And when I say rub and sniff, you break them up so you release the oils, and you really do just put your nostrils in there and inhale deeply.
It's herby, it's fruity, it's garlicky almost, it's spicy.
And different varieties give different aromas. This is what the brewers are looking for. They rely on the flavour of their beer by using their nose at this stage.
Herefordshire hop grower Simon Parker talking there to Marie Lennon. While the hops add the bitter notes, the foundation of beer is malt made from malting barley. Well, like hops, barley has struggled this year, and many farmers have found it difficult to produce barley, which makes the grade for malting. Anna Hill's been to find out about this exacting process at Crisp Malt in Great Ryborough. She met Chris Borrett from Adams and Howling, agricultural merchants who work with farmers growing barley, and Rebecca G, Director of Procurement and Logistics at Crisps.
We're in the middle of Norfolk near Fakenham, and this site here has been here for many, many years.
Yes, since 1870. There's really only two main ingredients, barley and water. So there's three main processes: steeping, where we soak the grain in water to get the moisture nice and high. We then have the germination process, where we just let the grain grow as it normally would in the field. And then the final process is kilning, so we're then drying that grain right down to about 5% moisture. In that process we can add some flavour and colour.
Well, we've got a lorry tipped up here with the barley coming off the back of it. What is this, Chris?
Well, it looks like winter barley to me. It's nice and bright, so it was first combined before we had a bit of rain during the middle of the summer. I guess it's probably flagon. Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, it's flagon.
You can tell just by looking at it.
Yeah.
That's amazing. You nerd.
Experience.
Sorry.
Or age, I don't know which one of the two. But. So the farmers will have to produce a certain specification of malting barley for it to be accepted. So that's the size of grain, the amount of nitrogen in the grain, and also germination, so it's got to grow, and that's one of the most important things. And Norfolk is one of the best places to grow malting barley. It's a maritime climate, so it's slightly cooler than, say, in the middle of the country, and it produces a longer growing season. It's also down to soil type and grower knowledge as well.
We're now walking up steps. We can smell the barley now. We've come to the edge inside one of these silos, and we can see barley in a great big barrel, really. There are some arms which looks like they would swing round. Is that right?
Yes, so this is the steeping vessel. So this grain has just finished its steeping process, so it will now be sitting at about 45% moisture. So it's sitting now currently on a perforated floor, so it's got a huge amount of air going up through the grain. The bed will be about 2 metres deep, and we're allowing that protein matrix within the grain to break down. It does take a lot of skill. We have a lot of experienced operators here.
We're just coming through a very damp corridor, dripping wet, and next door is the drying process. We're just coming into the control room. We've got screens in front of us, a lot of automation going on. Chris, all commodity markets are down at the moment. How has that affected malting?
We feel that the farmers' confidence is quite low at the moment, and we really want to be able to put something forward to give a 3 to 5 year focus on how they run their business. What we want to see is an increase in demand for local produce. We've got to work on these links through the chain to produce a more profitable crop.
Has the hectarage of barley dropped then for malting?
Yeah, we're seeing a reduction, and that's all to do with the demand and supply, and they're seeing prices drop, so they have reduced some of their area. But also there's hope that the markets will recover.
Rebecca, what about the demand?
Beer has been quite flat for a few years, and we are definitely seeing some opportunity there, though, in the rise of kind of low alcohol beers and a resurgence of kind of lagers as well. So some hope, definitely, but it has been a difficult year.
Anna Hill with the Barley Nerds in Norfolk. Now, one crop which thrived in a warm spring and hot summer is the cider apple, with many growers reporting a heavy crop of high-quality fruit. Westerns in Herefordshire is one of the biggest cider producers in the UK, producing 65 million litres every year. The business started in 1880 and now works with 180 apple growers and orchard owners in Gloucestershire, Worcestershire and Herefordshire. Marie Lennon met their business development manager, Daryl Hinksman.
We're looking at a pit full with about 80 tonnes of cider apples, bittersweet apples. All these will have been grown locally within 50 miles of here. They're the basis of all English-style ciders, really. So bittersweet apples, very high in tannin. and varieties like Michelin and Dabinet. Those are the two main varieties that we use to produce our cider.
And some of the orchards that you're working with, are they very long established orchards?
Yes. The one just over there is probably getting towards 100 years old.
The smell is so wonderful. It's just sweet and earthy, and we're looking at a mountain of them.
We're in the peak of the season now. We're hoping to process around 40,000 tonnes of bittersweet apples this season.
What's the growing year been like?
It's been a really strange growing year because we had a long, hot, dry summer. And what we're finding is sugar levels are really good, which aid fermentation and produce a stronger drink before we blend it back. But the overall size of the apple is slightly down. So the one is compensating for the other. So the apples are tipped into the pits, and then they're fed by water down to what's called the apple tables, where they run across rollers.
They kind of bounce along.
They bounce along. Then they go into a mill where they're chopped up into small bits. Then they go into the presses where they're squeezed to extract as much juice as possible. All our ciders spend time maturing in oak vats, some of which were the oak vats originally used by Henry Westons in 1880.
Oh my goodness. In my head, I had a very small oak vat, very traditional, old-fashioned. These are giants.
Some of these are 140 years old. The benefit is it imparts a flavour from the barrel. From years and years of cider fermenting in the oak barrels, the wood is almost saturated with the flavour of cider. So what it means is you get this roundness and this maturity and this lovely blend of apples and mellow oak.
Tell me a bit about the cider industry in the UK generally. Lots of hospitality really suffered during the pandemic, and some places haven't fully recovered. How has cider fared?
Cider's fared pretty well over the last 10 years. Obviously, we suffered after the pandemic because the on-trade was closed down for a significant period of time. This is pubs, clubs, restaurants, bars. They've just about got to the level they were in terms of volume sold pre-pandemic. But what has happened is the off-trade, so sales through supermarkets, shops, that has continued to grow and is growing year on year, and cider is growing within that. So it's very encouraging, yeah.
What's the next big development in cider, do you think?
I think we'll continue to see premiumisation. I suspect we will see larger bottle formats. So instead of 500ml bottles, 75cl bottles, almost as like a wine substitute with a screw top.
Well, isn't that the theory that cider is the wine of the UK, really?
It is. And these larger bottles really fulfil that need because it's something you can put on the table at dinner and share it.
Do you like drinking it yourself?
I do, very much.
Is that how you got into this?
It is how I started. My family are actually apple growers in the west of Hereford, so I've been around it since I was a child.
Daryl Hinksman from Western Cider with Marie Lennon. Well, next we meet an apple detective at work in the orchards of Somerset. Liz Copus is a pomologist, and together with Tim Gray of Parrot Cider, she's hunting lost apple varieties around the wonderfully named village of Kingsbury Episcopi. Our reporter Fiona Clampin met them both amongst the trees at Burrow Hill Farm Cider.
These are the Stoke Reds, aren't they, we're coming into now? Tiny little round red apples. Make lovely cider.
So what makes a good cider apple?
Well, it has to have lots of sugar, of course, from the fermentation point of view, but it has to have a little bit of acidity. If it's a bittersweet cider apple, it has to have tannin, because tannin is what gives the cider that lovely colour. It's pretty hard to walk on these apples.
Really hard. This is a massive orchard where we are. There are apples all over the grass, and the smell of the apples rising up is quite incredible. This is really the epicentre of cider making in Somerset.
It really is. It's a strange thing about Stembridge and Kingsbury Episcopi. It's like a little hill in the middle of the levels with a special soil and a special climate, I'm sure. And it's a very, very good place for growing apples. And there have been apples orchards here traditionally for centuries.
So tell me about the project then that the two of you have got off the ground.
Tim was looking for local varieties, and there's one that we couldn't find, and I said, well, I'm sure we've seen it before. There's a thing called Lambrook Pippin, very local, and we've searched everywhere, and we've sent likely ones up to be DNA tested, and they've all come back as, no, that's not it. That's something called improved Lambrook Pippin. But we're still hunting, and this is what keeps us going. And in the meantime, we've decided it was really worth logging all the ones that we can find that have come from this area, because they're all one big family.
The cider that we're drinking nowadays, right through the country, basically all starts with the varieties that come from here near enough. There's a few up around sort of Herefordshire way and all that.
Maybe they would dispute your view.
There's a few good ones there, but they can keep those.
But tell me about the project. What does it involve?
We just keep waiting for September each year, and then we get one go to look round some orchards before they're harvested, and then work out if we're going to DNA test something the year after.
We've gone back to the old history books, which have got some interesting analysis of juice and descriptions of fruit, the amount of tannin and the sugar and the acidity. And we've gone round the orchards talking to people. Do you know anything? Have you got any details of who planted this and what it was?
You've done some work in this particular orchard, and you found how many different varieties?
Oh, Tim and I went round the orchard the other day and we found 33 different varieties. Gosh.
There's one bush tree at the end of this orchard, just on an odd road that's just one tree left. It's called Cap of Liberty. It's probably been here for at least a couple hundred years, but it was used a lot to breed a lot of what we have now.
I think it's so important that we have as much data on the old varieties as possible, because if something in the way of variety is tolerant of drought, its genetic material will be useful. If it harvests really early or if it has other attributes which are useful, it's a database which is going to store up all that genetic material.
Pomologist Liz Copus ending that report from Somerset from Fiona Clampin. Well, as cider is to apples, perry is to pears. And like cider apples, perry pears have been bred over the centuries for pressing rather than eating. The National Collection of Perry Pears contains more than 100 varieties of the fruit, 2 trees of every variety in a 30-acre orchard in the Gloucestershire village of Hartbury. And now the perry enthusiasts there have been given an award for their work to preserve the fruit and the drink, as Vernon Harwood found out.
We're right in the middle of rural Gloucestershire. It's a beautiful orchard just here and trees around. And on our right here is the original tree first planted 20 odd years ago.
Jim Chapman has devoted much of his adult life to the humble perry pear.
If you try and eat a perry pear, you will spit it out. It's full of tannins and acids. Each of them's got a slight variation, both in when they ripen and the character of it, because the character of each fruit is different.
And with evocative names.
Yes, Merrylegs, Dead Boy, Lullum, which I always think is quite appropriate. Fantastic names.
On this tree, small fruit, still there, not been picked yet, about the size of a ping-pong ball.
That's it. This is rather a special tree, this one. A lovely red colour to the fruit, and if you bite into it...
Red flesh?
The flesh is red. I'll proceed to spit out the pear because it's a perry pear, and it makes some lovely pink perry.
Well, Jim's hard work was recently rewarded with a prize, courtesy of CAMRA, the Campaign for Real Ale. If you like, the Oscar of the orchard world. Andrea Bryers is CAMRA's award coordinator.
The Pomona Award is named after the Roman goddess of apples, which recognises people and groups that have made an outstanding contribution to the promotion of real cider or perry. And it's an opportunity for unsung heroes to be recognised, really. What impressed me was that over the years, many orchards have disappeared, and the work done by the Hartbury Trust is preserving many perry pear varieties for future generations.
We're very honoured to have received that award, and you've actually come at a very excellent time because we're about in the process of making some perry.
And Phil Kester is here in the Orchard Centre, hard at work.
We need to crush them down, so we scrap them in a scratter to crush them all down and get the juices out of them.
That sounds a lot like the cider making process. Is there much of a difference between making perry and making cider?
Perry is harder than cider in many different ways, in that pears aren't ripe for very long and they're not very good at blending. But the process itself is exactly the same as cider. The press itself is a cylindrical steel press, and the juice comes pouring out.
And tumbling into your bucket, that golden liquid.
Yes, it's stunning. We filter it, and then we just put it into containers and let it do its own fermentation and its own sugars and its own yeast.
The proof of the pudding, this isn't a pudding, but you know what I mean, is in the tasting.
sheer nectar.
A bit of lemon, bit of a sherbet bombshell, this one, I think. Beautiful with some cheese.
Well, here's to your next award, and here's to the perry producers of Gloucestershire.
Absolutely.
Cheers.
And cheers to Vernon Harwood there at the National Perry Pear Collection in Gloucestershire. That's it from us. I'm Charlotte Smith. The producer was Sarah Swadling. And Farming Today this week is a BBC Audio Bristol production.